Hello, welcome to School Committee Update today with Ward 4 School Committee member Andre Green, also chair of the committee. How are you doing, Andre?
Doing well. Kids are back in school, so we're thrilled.
Yeah. So I'm Sarah Fishman, and yes, so today is September 2nd, 2021, second day of school. So you have a daughter. I don't remember what grade she is.
She is in second grade at the Healy.
Okay.
Yep, currently there for her second day, so yeah, we're in good shape.
So how is she doing? I'm not sure I heard everything you said.
I said, she's in her second grade. It's her second day. She likes her teacher, so we're happy.
Okay. So it's been an okay transition for you guys?
Yeah, I think everyone was a little anxious yesterday, understandably, but got there, started living her life. The Healy had a back to school block party on Monday, which I think helped a lot. And I think we're trying to tackle. It's going to be a very unusual year, but it's also a good start.
Good. So what is because it's changed, I know, obviously over time, but is most of the instruction in classroom now? Is any of it Zoom or hybrid or what?
We are fully back in person. Actually, the state isn't really allowing for the kind of remote education we did last year. So they go into a classroom. People are 3 feet apart. Everyone's masked. We've passed policies and signed agreements with the unions to strongly support teachers and staff getting vaccinated. We put in a bunch of HVAC improvements last year. We think honestly we go into this school year as safe as anywhere in the country.
Mm-hmm. So what was the governor saying about mandates and not imposing? What was his take on that?
The consistency, the only consistency from the state throughout the pandemic really has been the governor's unwillingness to be bold and lead. So even though 80 polls indicate that 80% of the Commonwealth supports masking mandates, he didn't move to have DESE adopt a very mild mask mandate until I think, so he did math, just under 60% of all districts had already done so, which has been standard to his leadership, which is that he moves only after
for this coming school year.
Yeah.
The recent, yeah, okay. So there's a lot of that going around. I mean, doesn't the governor of Texas now have some mandate saying that people can't do the opposite of whatever it is he doesn't want people to do, or something like that?
So both Texas and Florida, in their current, both the governor of Texas and the current governor of Florida, in their race to be the worst governor in America, have issued mandates saying that school districts cannot require masks. Unfortunately, the people who actually care about children have been defying it. Most notably, the superintendent of Dallas has said he cannot and will not abide by that rule by the governor of Texas, who, by the way, has COVID.
Yes. All right. So, okay, you started to explain this. So people have to wear masks, and that's everyone.
For now, it's everyone. That we are revisiting this on a month-by-month basis.
Mm-hmm.
What we find in other countries is that Delta normally has a 3-month surge. If we follow that pattern here in America, we can look at rolling back some of the policies come later this fall or winter. I'll admit that I am skeptical that, since, as we just discussed, so much of the country is committed to not doing what we need to do to combat this. I admit to having some skepticism that we'll go to do the rollback, but if we can, it will still be the case that that rollback will only apply to people who are not vaccinated. I mean, to people who are vaccinated, excuse me. And that we are exploring the possibility of making a hard vaccine requirement for our staff. We did pass a policy saying that if a student is vaccine eligible, they have to be vaccinated in order to participate in non-academic extracurriculars. And we, it is certainly my intention, I believe, I think the committee's intention to strengthen vaccine requirements in as much as state law and our employee union agreement will allow. So that's continue to be our feeling, is that everyone needs to be vaccinated. That's what we're getting out of this.
All right, I'm having a little trouble understanding you. You're a little muffled. So if I don't seem like I'm responding to you appropriately, then I'm, say, oh, or something, or I'll ask if you would to repeat it. So I don't know. It's just kind of fuzzy, But of course, I got the main gist of all that. So you're looking at things month to month and all these contingencies. So right now, what is it for students? They have to wear the mask all the time.
Right now? Right now, if you were in a building,
right?
Student or staff, whatever, has to be masked.
So if they're at recess, do they wear it?
They are welcome to, but we're not requiring it outside, no.
But they don't have to.
Right.
Okay. All right. So then what about, and you started talking about this, the vaccinations for any sort of mandate for vaccinations of either students or staff?
So before the FDA gave the full official approval for the Pfizer vaccine, we made an agreement with the SCU, who has been a great partner in figuring out how to be safe this summer, that as part of their MOU for the year, the agreement was that once we got to the point where everyone was being largely masked, which, again, depends on what happens with Delta, it's to be required that in order for a teacher or to go unmasked, they'd have to show proof of vaccination. And if they do not show that proof, not only do they have to be masked, it has to be the KN95 grade mask. We are exploring the possibility in light of the new formal approval and the city's declaration that they will be pursuing this as well with their unions of doing a harder mask mandate, but we haven't made any decisions on that as of yet.
Okay, so if I'm a teacher now, do I have to prove vaccination or not?
If you want to be unmasked, yes.
I see. Okay. And now that shots are available, or they have been for longer than I realized, for students age 12 and up, what is the
so as of right now, the policy is that come October 20th, if you want to participate in non-academic extracurriculars and you are vaccine eligible, so you're over 12 and you don't have the religious or medical exemption, you have to be vaccinated.
To do the extracurriculars?
Yes.
Okay.
As I think this is another place where as the policies at state and federal levels change, as vaccination authorizations change, we will be revisiting. All our policies we're pretty specific on this. We firmly believe that ultimately speaking, everyone should be vaccinated. And all of our policies are moving towards that being an invitation that if you are involved in regular public schools, you should be vaccinated.
Okay. I know this isn't educational policy, but I know this is on everyone's mind and it's confusing and it's changing. So I appreciate your going through all the ins and outs of it. So It doesn't say on the Somerville Public Schools website homepage, it doesn't say anything about vaccinations for younger people. Is that purposeful? Is it not?
My guess is that, so the policy regarding extracurriculars just passed on Monday. So it's entirely possible that that update just hasn't made it to the website yet. I can definitely look into that. So state's been very clear that we can't require it as a requirement for enrollment. I think the state is wrong on that, but the state has made that decision very clear. But to the extent that we can use our policies to push people towards vaccination, we will.
Yeah. So did you hear about this, that Delta Airlines will charge its employees who are on a company health plan $200 a month if they're not vaccinated?
I've heard that companies were looking at that. I hadn't heard that any had pulled the trigger on it. I think it's a reasonable thing. I think, again, we're going to be talking to our unions about how to strengthen our vaccine requirements. I think, again, the only way we ever get out of this quagmire is mass vaccination.
So do you have constituents who come up to you and say, why aren't we doing more, or who dislike the idea of vaccination, or are these not real problems?
So we've certainly had, the angry emails saying, why are you requiring this? I'm thankful, and I want to thank the people of Somerville that we've not had the experiences of some of my colleagues in school committees and other communities where, like, there were communities in Massachusetts this year. We're just passing the mask mandate. The school committee needed police escorts. We have not had anything near approaching that here in Somerville. And I want to thank people of Somerville for being mature and understand the reality of this. But yeah, we certainly have received some parents who think we're making the wrong decision, but that's the nature of politics, right? Like, of course you're gonna get some people to disagree with your decision, but on this one, I don't think there's any real desire to change course.
So to the extent that you can know this, how much, what percentage of the population of kids do you think who are qualified to be vaccinated are? Do you have any sense of that?
I don't yet. I think we'll have a better sense of that next week. This information we're trying to figure out, but right now I don't think I have a good sense of that.
Okay, so this is not going to be the same pool of people, but on the city's dashboard, it says that 71% of 12 to 15-year-olds are fully vaccinated, I guess city residents,
right.
But only 46% of individuals who are age 16 to 19 are. So is that because the younger kids get taken by a parent or a guardian?
That's our theory, yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're even I think that's been our experience, like with permissions for like testing and what have you, is that the high school lags because like I did my daughter's permission slip. With the high schoolers, I have more independence. I think it takes longer to get it done.
Yeah, it's like voting, isn't it? I mean, it reminds me of voting because if you look at the bar graphs, that's a hard group to sometimes motivate. So not all the time, but some of the time. Okay.
Yeah, and I think we'll have a better sense of how that matches to SPS students in the next week or two. But yeah, right now, my guess would be that SPS students are more likely to be vaccinated than especially the 16 to 20-year-olds who are SPS students, but I don't know that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and the city data probably, misses people. And so one of the questions I was going to ask you is, I know at the very beginning of this, you guys were doing, the school district was doing things like teachers were going to homes and giving kids computers and making it possible for everyone to be receiving instruction. So is that still necessary? Is it still being done?
So again, the state has ruled that we can't do remote schooling, so that work isn't being done. And we're still doing outreach around testing and vaccines. There will be vaccine clinics in schools. We are going to do everything we can to make sure that every student is able to be in school every day. That is
It's
our
hard.
commitment. It's
It
hard,
must
but
be hard because it's hard to do that under normal circumstances, right? And this is
we are
extraordinary circumstances.
right. So one of the things that I think the pandemic has made abundantly clear is how much of how many responsibilities devolve on the schools, right? Like the way we switch schools to basically provide all of the young person's needs. And I want to commend schools across the country who, under really tough circumstances, stepped up to that requirement under this pandemic of doing things that, you know, we were feeding 1,000 people a day, right? This is what our society expects of schools to do. Oh, and then after all of that, by the way, educate kids. And so I do think we need to have a real conversation as a city, a state, as a country about how can we not have schools be responsible for taking care of everyone. But until we have that conversation, we're not going to leave people behind. Just, you know, triage is not our nature.
Okay, so I'm going to try to not talk about vaccines for a bit and see if we are able to do that or we wander back. So there was this, I think I've discussed this with you before. There was this memo of understanding between the schools and the police department, and there were some meetings in May. Can you explain, first of all, what the issue was and what happened with the vote that was 7-1?
Sure. So, I think that there's been some media coverage of that that I think misses the context. The reality is that we haven't had a police presence in schools, which is a vague term, since before COVID. The SRO, we had the one state required SRO in the buildings in high school. That SRO had to take leave. We haven't had one since. The STEPS program had already been with short-term budget cuts. So a lot of the official programming when we took the vote already was out. We, as a school committee, believe, and we believe that all districts should be doing this, that we are due for a periodic review of the relationship between SPS and SPD and other policing. I think, you know, it's just good governance. And while we're doing that, the status quo remains, which is that we don't have an SRO in the building, which no longer required by state laws. In the time between when the SRO went on leave and when we had that vote, state law changed, so we no longer required to have a school resource officer. And we are looking to bring back steps until we have had a thorough conversation this year, involving students, involving parents, about what it is we think the relationship between SPS and policing should look like. And I look forward to having that conversation this school year.
All right, so you're saying a lot of this was already sort of happening?
So the vote basically codified the status quo.
Okay. So now this is a little outside of your purview, but police department. There's so many people running for city council. I mean, the turnover is immense, and there'll be a new mayor. And a lot of the palm cards that I've been getting, or people I've been talking to, talk about defunding the police and moving some of that money to other departments. And I just was curious what defunding meant to you, because it's one of those words where there are a lot of possibilities, maybe.
So I recognize that I've been intentionally not having a super active role in this debate in the city. Again, I think, for schools and the role of policing in schools, we should have a conversation, and I'm trying not to put my thumb too heavily on that scale for that. I will say that I think society is well overdue for a larger conversation about what do we expect policing to do? And if you want to call that defund or reform or transform or reimagine, whatever buzzword you want to use, the larger conversation needs to happen. I think obviously sort of like schools, one of the problems facing our society is that we ask police to do too much. Things that shouldn't be their responsibility are. And so I absolutely think that in a good and just world, police in America come 2030 looks radically different than they do in 2021. How we get there, I think, is a conversation to have as a community. And I am not going to try to declare the path to it.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the same question just because there's a new office with that name. So Restorative Justice, what does that mean to you? Is that new office at all a conduit for moving this conversation forward, for asking the hard questions and stuff?
So, Somerville Schools has been trying to move towards a restorative justice model since before I got on the school committee, but it certainly accelerated in the last 5 years. I think ultimately restorative justice is, it's the current term for the idea we should always be striving for, which is an idea of justice that rights wrongs and repairs harms, as opposed to justice without vengeance. I think with vengeance and punishment.
I mean, doesn't it imply, I mean, it's sad that you have to say this, right? Because justice should be justice, but there are places and people who don't get justice. So this is sort of saying, tell me if you agree, that we have to go back and fix it.
Right. I think somewhere along the line, I shouldn't say somewhere along the line, I think historically, and it's not true, historically, justice and vengeance have been intrinsically linked in a way that, I don't think gets us to the society we actually want to have. And so I think, at its simplest, restorative justice to me is looking at justice in a way that isn't about vengeance, but it's about, again, repairing damage and righting wrongs. I think certainly, I think we're trying to get there. I certainly wouldn't say we're there yet in SPS. Part because, for any institution, its own habits run deep, and two, because we don't exist in a vacuum, right?
Is there something that you guys need that you don't have, or that budget precludes you from? I mean, I know this is a big issue, but is there any tool that you don't have in your toolbox that you wish you did?
On this one,
Okay.
I was sorry that it was not no. I was like, that's a tricky question, right? Because again, we don't exist in a vacuum, right? There are legal obligations we must fulfill. There are larger ethical issues. I think one of the things, going back to like policing in schools being a tricky question in general, is that my sense is that the perception often is that the reason police is in schools is to discipline or punish or, God forbid, arrest students. When in reality, it is much more likely to be the opposite. Most of the time, if police are involved in a school situation, I would say almost all, overwhelmingly majority of the time, it's to protect a student.
Yeah. So we don't have, were you going to say something else? And
so I was going to say that. So it's tricky to imagine a world where we get to the fully restorative justice world we want to be in, without larger societal reforms as well.
Okay. So we don't have much time left. I'm going to ask you about endorsements. You're not going to give me any specific ones as my guess.
Yeah, that's correct.
Do you have, well, this is understandable. But do you have any thoughts, especially in Ward 7, where there's a race and there's one person who's, educator, actual teacher from Medford School, and then there's another person who is done a lot of education policy work. Do you have any preference or thoughts on what kind of person should fill any open school committee slot?
So the thought I will share, which is not relevant to the candidates in Ward 7, but is that it deeply bothers me that after 180 years of Somerville School Committee, I remain the second person of color to serve on the body.
Yeah.
I do think, I would encourage, and it says for any race at any time, I would encourage voters to take into account the need for a diversity of views and a diversity of backgrounds at the table for school committee. And that can be looked at through any of a number of lenses, and I would never presume to tell a voter which lens was most important. But I do believe the reason there are 7 of us is to make sure that we're getting a diverse range of lenses through which to look at the district. And I would hope we always can continue that.
Yeah. So if I may, you are the first male person of color, which I think is even more worth noting because school committees, at least in the past, have been predominantly female dominated.
And it currently is, for the record.
And I remember Anita Harris, who I believe was the first person of color on the school committee. She was an outsized presence. It was very hard not to notice her. So just thought I would point that out. So we have to stop very soon. Have you met has the committee met with the new high school principal yet?
So we haven't met with him as a body. I think many of us have met him. I have. We will at some point in the next couple meetings bring him to do a formal introduction. I was not a use of his time the Monday before school started, but at some point we will definitely do that. He is fantastic. He's hit the ground running at the high school, and I expect great things from him.
His office is right on the outside, and I decided I'd give myself an outside tour. It was 5 p.m. on a Sunday. It was very muggy, and I'm like, no one's going to be there. So I go and I look around, and his office, you could see right into it. He has all this funky stuff. Anyway, I look forward to hearing about that from one of you guys afterwards. I hope it goes well. And thank you. This has been a school committee update with Andre Green. Have a good day.